Segment 5.3.ה' מה אעשה אם? מה אעשה אם? In this activity, you'll learn how to counsel a friend concerning what he or she will do or should do tomorrow, given that a certain course of action is followed today. It's worth pointing out that this activity will lead you into a level of conversation that is, frankly, rather sophisticated. Simply consider this. You will be pondering the future, and you will offer a forecast, sometimes with the notion of giving advice. Due to the complexity of that, it will be important to review this introduction thoughtfully. Here's the imaginary situation. A friend has come to you, and he or she is seeking your advice. He's facing a dilemma and would like your help trying to figure out what sort of consequences may fall out if he or she takes a proposed course of action. Your role as the friend or advisor will be to listen to that proposed course of action and then to think. Reflect on what you think will be the consequence, actually two consequences, which will result from your friend taking that course of action. The easiest way to grasp this will be to take a look at the model that's given below. Notice the first entry labeled Today's Action. Here is your friend's proposed course of action. It starts off with an if clause. Incidentally, we call this a protasis, and winds up fashioning a question. So here's the sample. Im hayom, and now in brackets comes the particular proposed course of action. Eshbor keli sarah hagadol, and now it wraps up with the question. Ma e'aseh machar. Let's read it through smoothly. Im hayom eshbor keli sarah hagadol, ma e'aseh machar. Notice the translation where it's expressed, if I were to break. As indicated in the footnote to this translation, the connotation, if I were to break, that hypothetical sense, can naturally be conveyed by the yiktol. So we have the yiktol verb eshbor, translated either I will break, or here in a protasis, the first part of a conditional statement, rendered appropriately, if I were to break, im eshbor. Thus, when you put together your own today's action statement, you similarly will employ a yiktol, just as in the model, im hayom eshbor. Now let's move to the second portion labeled Tomorrow's Forecast. This constitutes the forecast or advice that follows, arising from the course of action that a friend has proposed. It begins by recasting the condition, the protasis, namely, im hayom tishbor keli sarah hagadol. Incidentally, did you notice the shift from eshbor, first person, to tishbor, second person? And now the first forecast, aleph, machar silchi li tomar lesara. Notice that the fundamental verb, tomar, is expressed in the yiktol. In case you're endeavoring to track the gender of the verb silchi, it is feminine, and that's determined by the fact that the person addressed is Sarah. It is a feminine imperative since Sarah is being directed or asked to forgive. The second element of forecast, labeled Beit, reads V'chesef titein la. Once again, the verbal portion is a yiktol, titein, meaning you will give, or possibly with the connotation you should give. Please notice that in each element of the forecast, that is the two consequences, the yiktol verb does not appear first. It does not appear first. Something else is placed in front of it. That is intentional in order to preserve the appropriate meaning for this exercise. Let's read the tomorrow's forecast statement through more smoothly. Im hayom tishbor keli Sarah hagadol, machar silchi li tomar lesara, v'chesef titain la. 2 notes and 2 suggestions will help you carry out this activity more easily. First, have you noticed that this activity often offers a translation of either will or should? The explanation for this is rather simple. It boils down to this. Both the meaning you will and the meaning you should are embraced by the range of meaning for the Yiktol form. If we bring this information to bear in the forecast statement Aleph above, it means that it will be up to the reader to determine whether to translate the expression Tomar lesara as either you will say to Sarah, or rather with the sense of advice, you should say to Sarah. This holds true for what you will be composing as well. As you compose with the Yiktol form, it may convey either the notion of you will or the notion of you should, depending on what seems most appropriate for the context. We'll explore this variable meaning within the Yiktol more fully in Module Chamesh Nikud Arba. Here's the second note. Did you observe the guideline in the instructions asking that you would begin your forecast statements with a word such as machar, meaning tomorrow, in place of beginning right out with a Yiktol verb? It is important that you avoid beginning with the Yiktol verb because in that case it would convey a little different meaning. It would convey the notion of I firmly hope that you would do thus and such, instead of meaning simply you will, or with the alternative translation, you should. Now for some suggestions for the Today's Action portion of this activity. The table labeled Today's Action, if I were to, offers several verbs that you might find helpful. Don't feel restricted to these, but these can give you at least a starting point. Several of them have been glossed, while some have not. If you get stuck trying to remember the meaning of one of the verbs which has not been glossed, simply call out Ozreini, and someone near you will no doubt come to your aid. Here are some suggestions for fashioning the tomorrow's forecast portion of your response. 2 excellent places to go to find sample verbs are on the one hand segment Chamesh Nikud Shalosh Nikud Aleph and segment Chamesh Nikud Shalosh Nikud Gimel. Here is what segment Chamesh Nikud Shalosh Nikud Aleph looks like. And here are even more verb options offered in segment Chamesh Nikud Shalosh Nikud Aleph. If you're looking for second feminine singular verbs, then segment Chamesh Nikud Shalosh Nikud Gimel is a good place to look. It begins by offering these, and there are more which follow. Let's close the introduction of this activity by recapping the steps that you'll want to go through. Step A. Begin by crafting a Today's Action statement of your own. B. Please include an object in order to enhance the interest level of your Today's Action statement. C. As soon as your instructor directs, exchange your Today's Action statement with a neighbor. D. Look over what your neighbor has given to you. E. And then respond by crafting 2 statements that will comprise your tomorrow's forecast response, what you anticipate your neighbor will do or should do in view of the Today's Action statement that he or she has given to you. F. Keep in mind that your tomorrow's forecast statements should begin with a word such as machar, in order that the Yiktol verb does not appear first in the then clause, which is known as the apodosis. G. Please vary the verbs in order to create a little more variety and interest in the statements that you fashion.